Negotiations over the USMCA are about the sectors most directly involved, like autos and agriculture and energy. But ultimately, they're about three countries, what they hope to achieve from any revisions to the trade agreement, and what they need to protect. For these three perspectives, we welcome now Kirsten Hillman. She's former Canadian Ambassador to the United States, Gerónimo Gutiérrez Fernandez, former Mexican Ambassador to the U.S., and Kellyanne Shaw, former USTR General Counsel, now with the Aiken Group here in Washington. I'll start with you, Kirsten, because you were involved in the USMCA negotiation. Let me ask the really scary question. What is the chance we end up with no deal?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing, and there's a lot of complicated process around what's going on right now. I think the one thing that's important for people to understand is that there is a deal, and even if on July 1st the parties don't agree to renew it, it stays in place, and we work to find ways to come to an agreement on modifications. But while we're working on that, the agreement stays in place. So I think the chances of the deal staying in place are very high. Then arrangements around the modifications, I also think we have a very good chance. There's a lot of things in particular that USTR has said they're looking for that I think both Canada and Mexico can work with.
Let's ask a different kind of risk, because I've also seen some people say there's a possibility that the U.S. would do a deal with Mexico and leave Canada out, given some of what the Prime Minister of Canada has been saying. Is there any prospect for that, Gerónimo?
I think we saw it during the first USMCA negotiation. We saw, a similar environment, and I think the fact that we ended up with a trilateral agreement reflects the fact that it is extremely important for North America as a region. So, trade negotiations are never easy. Even less so nowadays. Even less so when you have sort of a contaminated agenda, a very complex geopolitical agenda and security agenda at the same time going on. But in my view, there has never been a time, I think, which makes more sense to continue building up our North American economic region. And if we add security to that, given the geopolitical context, to me makes all the sense in the world. Nevertheless, to be also objective, we have never been, I think, in the past 30 years, as close as losing that opportunity. And that's, in a sense, that's a shame.
Kellyanne, Gerónimo says there's never been a time when it's more important to have this. Does President Trump agree with that? If you listen to his trade representative, it doesn't always sound that way.
Well, look, I think the North American trading relationship is the biggest trading relationship on the planet. It is incredibly important. The real question is, does President Trump value USMCA, this particular trade agreement? He's always been skeptical of it. I was in the first Trump administration. I was there when this agreement concluded, when it passed through Congress. He thought it was an improvement on NAFTA, but insisted on this sunset provision, which we're dealing with right now, the 6-year review, so that it wouldn't be like NAFTA, where we're stuck with it for 25 years and can't do anything about it. But I think at the end of the day, everybody appreciates how important this economy and this North American trading system is.
David, could I just add one thing, too, that I think is important to recognize? There's a lot of discussion around tariffs, right? Tariffs are a big part of the discussion that we've had since President Trump has come back into office. But the USMCA contains all the rules on intellectual property protection, all the rules on agriculture, all the rules on services trade, all the rules that deal with how we have our customs procedures sort of coordinated between the three countries. So the agreement is the foundation of the integrated nature of our relationship. If it goes away, none of us are bound by those rules anymore. That's why the implications of the agreement going away are enormous.
I think that when USMCA came into effect, enter into force in it was actually seen as the future model agreement by the United States. I think the fact that it includes a provision that we did not have in the North American Free Trade Agreement, which is the possibility of reviewing, makes all the sense in the world. Because in NAFTA, it was sort of, all or nothing. Again, I would emphasize that in the end, USMCA is not perfect, but it works. And I think the past 6 years, we have seen that. Our intra-regional trade has evolved favorably. I think that if you ask a lot of the industries, that are relevant for North America, that they would tell you that USMCA is a fundamental tool for them in producing together in North America and exporting to other regions.
Kellyanne, you raise automotive as a really important factor here, always has been among these three countries. But I think you can't right now discuss automotive, even more so than 6 years ago, without talking about a fourth country, which is China.
Yeah.
And the looming prospect of Chinese exports of automobiles into Canada, as well as ultimately perhaps the United States. Certainly we're seeing it in Europe. So to what extent might the Trump administration see this renegotiation, review of USMCA be a way of creating, I think some of their Canadian friends called it Fortress North America?
President Trump was describing it as a zero-sum game. He wants the auto industry, I want the auto industry, only one of us is going to have it. Now, it's a negotiation, so we'll see where this lands, but I do think that the administration wants a very aggressive change to the rules of origin, which would actually also have a domestic content requirement, meaning some of that car is going to have to be made in the United States to qualify for USMCA, and almost none of that car should be made by any components from China. And that's a way not only to bolster the domestic industry, but also to protect the North American industry from Chinese inputs.
In the case of Mexico, I think going back to the deficit, I think it's important to note, again, data, which is, around 40% on every dollar that is exported from Mexico into the United States is actually a U.S. component. That's a figure that has been there for quite some time. So you have to, again, if you go into the nitty-gritty of the deficit, I think that needs to be taken into account. Since USMCA's first negotiation, I think it became clear that the U.S. wanted to capture a bigger chunk of the growth of the auto industry into the future. And I think that is going to be accomplished. I hope it is accomplished in a way that companies which are really North American, Ford, GM, to mention a few, they operate throughout the Americas. It's done so in a way that they can continue to be competitive worldwide. And if that addresses the concerns by the administration, which I think it's possible, I think we should get to a good place within a few months, hopefully, or certainly within the next 12 months.
You talk about certainty. Businesses, certainly the United States, Canada, and Mexico, want just to know what the rules are, even more than what the rules are specifically. Just know what they are, and they stand fast. What are the prospects of that right now? Because there's also, as I understand it, under the terms of the USMCA, the possibility of like every year you get to redo this thing, take another look at it. And goodness knows President Trump seems to enjoy that process.
Right. Well, I think that if the countries come to an agreement to review and then make modifications to USMCA, then they have the option of renewing it. And if it is renewed, then the next review comes up in 6 years, not 1 year. It sort of extends it for 16 years with another review in 6 years. So I think that that's the way the clause was created. The clause was created with the understanding that all three parties would come every 6 years and say, is it still fit for purpose? Do we need to make modifications? We thought that was the right timing for a variety of reasons. And I still do. I mean, we all lived with the NAFTA that became impossible to modify until it wasn't, until President Trump, and to be fair, he went to a place that people had not been willing to go before, which was to open it up and have a good look at it. And that resulted in a much more modern agreement, that resulted in an agreement that was much more effective, and a mechanism that allows us to look at it every 6 years. So ideally, I think that, Canada will work really hard to find some kind of solution that gives us stability, and then we'll look at it again in 6 years.
What are the prospects of the result of this, whenever that happens, being actually enhanced trade among the three countries? Or is the goal instead just not losing what we already have? Is there any goal of using this offensively to have even more and better trade rather than just let's not lose what we've got?
Well, I tend to think that we actually have not seen the benefits of USMCA for a sufficient long period of time. Let me explain why. The agreement went into effect in 2020, right at the time that COVID hit. So that immediately affected our economic business and trade among ourselves. After that stabilized, you're beginning to see, in my view, a pickup in trade and employment thanks to that agreement. I think what we're going to see is tremendous benefits for the three countries. Now, again, I'm not naive. We're not there yet. And I think we're seeing our trade increase, even with tariffs nowadays, right? We're seeing investment. President Trump wants, naturally, every leader wants as much investment coming into their country. And that's a central part of the discussion. The US invests around $160 billion. That's the stock of US foreign direct investment in Mexico. Mexico, unknown to many Americans, has about 60. If you normalize that by the size of the economy, Mexico is actually investing more in the United States than in the United States in Mexico. And there are a lot of Mexican companies willing to invest more. And I think that's the certainty of having, the deal for the next 16 years is critical for them. And essentially in all sectors. Even if you talk to the agricultural sector here in the States, they want that certainty also because they export billions of dollars of grains to Mexico.